The Dutch government plays an important role in the spatial planning of the Netherlands. It is involved, for example, in the development and improvement of roads, railways, waterways, nature areas and recreational areas. The government's spatial planning policy is laid down in the National Spatial Strategy. There are also many sectoral policies, such as the Agenda for a Vibrant Dynamic Countryside, that have consequences for spatial planning. Every year, the government spends €8 billion on spatial planning. In this film, the Court of Audit shows where the government is involved in spatial planning in the Netherlands. You will see how the empty map of the country is filled in with spatial policy. At the end, you will see that the government's spatial planning policy covers a great deal of the Netherlands, and that in many areas there is an accumulation of policy and funds. The government often uses a mix of the following spatial planning instruments: money, spatial planning instruments, legislation and regulation, and administrative influence. The government also carries out its own spatial planning projects and programs. You will now see 44 maps of the Netherlands showing where the government is involved and what instruments it uses. The first 4 maps show the government's international and European obligations in the field of spatial planning. Notice how the map of the Netherlands is gradually coloured in with government policy. Government policy is laid down in national spatial plans for the development of a particular part of the country. The instrument most often used by the government is the policy strategy, formerly known as the National Spatial Planning Key Decisions. Policy strategies outline the main spatial developments, such as areas where buildings are permitted and areas that must remain green. They also present the measures the government will take to achieve its goals. Policy strategies are formally adopted by the House of Representatives. An example of a policy strategy is the National Spatial Strategy. Municipalities and provinces must take account of government policy in their own spatial plans. You will now see the areas in which the government has already developed spatial plans. The areas already shown will remain visible, shaded grey. The government also invests in areas where it does not take planning key decisions. These areas are presented now. The areas already shown will remain visible, shaded grey. As you can see, the government is involved in spatial planning in a large part of the Netherlands. The darker the area, the more spatial planning instruments the government has used in it.